everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and welcome back to Primetime Crisis. It's time for some more Arrow talk, and the episode this week was Vigilante, where we're taking another B or C list superhero slash vigilante character from DC Comics, giving them their own episode, putting their name in the title, and then not really developing them very much. We had this with Human Target a couple weeks ago, and I like how it was handled a little bit better with him than with Vigilante. Certainly, that's somewhat justified since these are both mysterious characters and are kind of intended to be, to some degree, a question mark, but I'm really hoping with both of these guys that moving forward we get to bring them back and develop them a little bit, and that they're not just plot devices for something in the episode to happen that the writers decide needs to happen, or just there for thematic purposes. And that's really the case with Vigilante. This is but I'm glad that he's not dead at the end. I'm glad that he disappears, and there's every reason to expect that he'll come back. We can do some really cool things with him down the line. This is a good time to bring him in, and of course the perfect show to have Vigilante in. Green Arrow in this world is a homicidal Batman, and Vigilante is the kind of extreme of even that. And so I like the idea of bringing him in now. I think he also would have been a really good first season character. I find myself wondering immediately why he's just now coming in, and I suppose, I mean, like story-wise, inside the narrative, and I suppose it's because he just had whatever horrible thing, tragic thing happen to him recently, and has been developing his vigilante persona in the background or something. And we don't know what the timetable is with that. We don't know very much about him. We just know that he lost someone and expects that Green Arrow hasn't, and that's why he's not going as far as Vigilante thinks that he should. If he had any notion that the Green Arrow has ever killed anyone, he would... I can't imagine why he would make the assumption that there was no tragic background that got him there. But then again, he's living in a comic book universe rather than reviewing a comic book universe like I am, where I am, with these kinds of stories, constantly seeing tragic backgrounds that get people to extreme places, and generally, of course, it would take that sort of a trauma to get you there. But so far, he seems pretty generic, and I'm hoping that we do get to flesh him out and make him more interesting. Sadly, it doesn't feel like anybody was super excited to have Vigilante in this show. Not like there's a lot of just giant diehard Vigilante fans out there, but he's a character that I'm only vaguely familiar with, but I'm a little bit nostalgic for that character and was excited about seeing him here. And of course, as I've been saying on all the Crisis vlogs lately, I'm generally on news blackout on these because I want to react and respond to what we're seeing week to week on these shows in kind of real time. So I didn't know Vigilante was coming, and when I saw the episode title, I was kind of excited about it. But when I was a kid, I read a couple of issues of the early 90s Vigilante that I got at a flea market, and I always liked his costume a lot. I always liked how mysterious and kind of foreboding he was, and I like that he's got this really cold and ruthless kind of attitude, and it would be neat to see him and Green Arrow interact together some, and not just having to be adversaries. I'd like to see them have to go on a mission together for some reason, so that Oliver can face head on who he was and who he is, because last episode was all about the progress he's made, and I leave it up to you to decide whether you're actually seeing on screen what the show is claiming we're seeing. And the more I thought about it, the more I think I gave it maybe too much credit last episode. There's all this talk from Felicity last episode about how Oliver used to kill first and ask questions later. Killing was his first recourse, now it's his last recourse. I think we've seen examples this season where it kind of still is his first recourse. I do like the idea of Oliver going from one extreme to another extreme. I'm going to murder whenever I have to, resort to the kinds of methods that the bad guys use because the ends do justify the means, versus having a completely black and white virtue ethics kind of way of looking at things, where you say it's never, ever, ever right to kill, and no matter how many people might get hurt or die in the process, I'm going to always leave people alive. And and I like the idea that he would decide that that is absurd and unsustainable, and he has to find some kind of a middle point. He says here he's trying to do better. And I feel like the writers are really struggling to figure out, and I feel like we're seeing this on the screen, that they're struggling to decide who he was and where he is now, and it just hasn't happened very naturally. It hasn't been as character driven as the show would like you to believe it has, and so it's at any given point we check in with a character, and it's not seeing naturally where that character is based on the decisions they've made and what's happened to them. It's let's finagle everything and spoon feed the audience with exposition or with arguments from some character, not telling the story through the action, but through kind of moral platitudes and rhetoric and stuff, to say this is where we want this character to be, so this is where the character is, and hopefully you don't spend too much time going back and looking at all of the things that we retconned. It's a very McFarlane way to look at it. It's not quite Spawn bad, but it's, and this season I think has been better even at that, but it's still doing it. It's just, it has been worse. Hard to hold this show to a very high standard based on the last couple of seasons. And so anyway, I like the idea of, if this were really what we had done, if the story matched what the show seems to be trying to tell us has happened, I like the idea of Oliver seeing the extreme of what he could have become had he kept going in the Hood direction, as opposed to becoming Green Arrow and changing his identity and what he stands for. As it is, though, Vigilante is, like I said, just not super interesting yet. He just says, well, Green Arrow, you don't go far enough, and you've never experienced pain. Of course, obviously, he has, and Vigilante just doesn't understand what he's gone through and really what he's talking about. And he's gone to the furthest extreme for whatever reason. Maybe I would appreciate all that more if I knew more about what had happened to him. But Vigilante is like a, no, you have to rule with an iron fist. You have to, punishment doesn't fit the crime. You just kill everyone who does anything remotely wrong. And so, I like how I like that we're basically in a place with the show because we keep tiptoeing around the vigilante versus superhero question, and we can't decide what Oliver's morality really is. It's okay for him to have a crisis about it. It's okay for him not to know, but I feel like that's come late enough now that like all through this show he's always kind of moralizing and trying to figure out what he's about, and he'll land on something for a minute, but it's never solid, even when the show thinks it's solid. That's kind of the problem. And I think every protagonist in all of the Kreisberg Berlanti shows has had this problem to some degree. Everybody. Flash has it, Supergirl has it. I like everybody to some degree has that issue. So we're to a place now where, while Oliver is trying to decide if he's, I mean, I guess before it was if he's a bad person or not, and now it's more just, has he been effective? But while he's wrestling with all of that, to give him perspective and to try to give the audience perspective, we're drawing the line now at, well, you don't murder people who just rob banks. You don't murder people who haven't murdered anybody else. Like that's where we're at now. And I think it's kind of amusing how extreme that is. again, as I've said before, it would be fine for Oliver to have his own morality that isn't mine. It's just it had been inconsistent so much up to this point that I feel like we're having to reinvent it and then kind of backtrack and pretend like things we've seen we haven't really seen anyway. So Vigilante's costume is not real impressive. I was a little let down because we got to see a drawing, like a sketch drawing of it that looked like the spitting image of the 90s costume, like from like the chest up, and I kind of thought maybe we would get just a straight up spandex thing, and that would be like not horribly unrealistic because it would because I know that this show always likes to give people armor because if they don't have armor and they get shot or something, we don't buy that they could make it. So they've got to be all padded up. But Vigilante's costume was always kind of like Danger Diabolic. It was always the character Diabolic. It was more like what you would wear for a jewel heist or something. And I was kind of hoping that we would get to see that. And it still has some of the staples. It has the goggles are shaped the way that they are in the comics. I'm trying to figure out how he's seeing out of them because they look almost like a wood finish. It was like I don't know what they're made out of exactly, but I was trying to figure out how he's seeing out of them. And then he does have the V, but I thought the costume was somewhat generic. I just don't feel like anybody was especially excited to bring this character to screen, and maybe that'll change later on. I wondered about how he escaped at the end. He gets roped up by Oliver several times around a post, and then, and I like that his costume's booby-trapped. When Oliver touches it, there's an explosion, and then he's gone. And I'm like, well, how'd you get out of that fast? I don't understand. It's pretty comic book, but this show is wanting to make me think that we've gone back to a more grounded place, so that seemed a little bit silly. A lot of the logic in this episode is kind of off and a little, again, a little silly to me, or I feel like we haven't thought things through. Let's talk about the Prometheus plot and where we are with it so far. So Quentin, last episode at the end, and I wasn't sure how to read it yet, and now that I know, it's awkward. So he had blood on his hands, as he says this episode, literally blood on his hands, and he has one of the metal arrowheads that Prometheus was using, and Oliver makes the assumption at the end, in talking to Thea, that he is being set up. And I thought that was a little bit of a leap, because he certainly could be mind-controlled in some way, brainwashed in some way. He's been blacking out. Yes, it's because he's drinking, but that whole thing is so weird. I feel like that, and I might be wrong, we might find out that they're wrong about it at the end, but I feel like the show is telling me he was being set up, and it can't just be that, right? Because Oliver says at the end that Prometheus seems to be going out of his way to pin everything the Throwing Star Killer did on Quentin. And that's really weird because if that's all it was, why just put that in his apartment and not leak it to anyone? Especially because you have corrupt cops on the force and stuff. They're like Quentin, nobody knows about it except for Quentin and Thea. Like he goes to her about it, but that doesn't look like a frame job to me. It looked like he had done some bad things and had maybe hurt someone and didn't know it. Like he was a sleeper agent or something. And it looks like maybe that's not the direction we're going, but I guess it's still possible moving forward that Oliver and Thea just read it wrong? I don't know. That was weird because at the end of toward the end of last episode, the big kind of epiphany they have is, well, it's gotta be somebody connected to the police department, because they were able to, because Prometheus has been able to get Oliver's old weaponry, his old arrows, and melt them down and turn them into his new weaponry. So then we had intercut that with Lance finding that. So I thought what we were saying there was Lance was the person who was getting into the evidence room. And now it looks like maybe that's not the case. So now it's looking like we might be plotting episode to episode and scene to scene again. And I really hope that's not the case. This stuff's not adding up for me yet. And again, it's possible that it will all come together and make sense, but I don't trust this show. And I was a little weirded out by all of that. It seems like now maybe it's just a way to write him out for a while, for whatever reason. The other thing that was strange about that conversation at the end was there's another epiphany where Oliver suddenly goes, oh, wait a minute, maybe Prometheus knows that I am the Green Arrow. And I'm like, how were you not already thinking that? He had the list. Like, the very first place my mind went as soon as he was, and of course he's shocked by it. And he's like, things are, last episode, he's like, or maybe it was even the episode before, he's like, okay, things are getting real heavy. This is about me. I've brought this upon us. And now, it's only just now that he's realizing that whoever has been doing all of this probably knows Oliver is Green Arrow? I realize that Oliver is not the world's greatest detective, but that's ridiculous, I think. I cannot believe he has not already put that together. Anyway, so not especially surprising, it turns out by the end of this that Evelyn is working for Prometheus. I guess I kind of like the idea that there's a mole in with the recruits because we've been talking about police corruption. I like the idea that Prometheus has even gotten to Oliver's team. It makes the team coming together in the first place at the beginning of the season look even more contrived than it did, because Oliver didn't want to do that. He just listened to Felicity and went ahead and put this team together. He was fine just trying to save the city as the mayor and Green Arrow all simultaneously, all by his lonesome, and he would have kept doing that if it weren't for Felicity. So Prometheus is kind of lucky that he was able to even get anyone in that camp, honestly. But now that she's there, some of the things she said last episode aren't as glaring, I don't think, except it maybe would show her hand a little bit. I think she's maybe projecting some, and we're going to have to find out, obviously, who Prometheus is and how those two got together and what's in it exactly for Evelyn, why she's doing this. But last episode, she is calling Oliver a serial killer and being really self-righteous about it. And again, it might be her projecting something now that we know that she's on Team Prometheus. And so that might ultimately not seem as... because I know a lot of people in the comments were kind of irritated with her last episode, and it turns out, oh, she's the mole this season. So she's an idiot for doing that, if that's the case, because, she might be showing her hand a little bit. If part of the motivation is we hate Oliver Queen because of what he's turned this city into, and I guess, they would be somewhat hypocritical because they have become even worse than him. But maybe that's the whole idea, is just, look what you've transformed this city into. Everything we're doing is your fault. And, I kind of like the idea of maybe Prometheus, whoever it turns out to be, trying to make life a living hell for Oliver by going to the furthest extremes of vigilantism and what he seemed to be when he came back from the island. Speaking of extremes, I thought Diggle was a little out of character this episode, but I don't like how we got him to where he is with killing his brother last season and everything anyway, so Diggle has been a little gone for me. But this episode, he's stepping over a line and brutalizing people because he's upset about a lot of personal things. And unless he's just totally snapping, I feel like even cabin fever Diggle, on the run Diggle, not being able to see his son, because he used to have a daughter, but now he has a son, Diggle, wouldn't go as far as he goes here, just taking personal frustrations out on people. I really kind of resisted that. I thought the ending with him and Wild Dog was kind of heartfelt, and I like their relationship. They're making me like Wild Dog more and more, but the problem is I don't know why Diggle didn't think of that in the first place. There's just this throwaway line of, well, all the people that were watching our house are somewhere else now, so we were able to get away. But I thought it was kind of weird that Wild Dog was able to put all that together when Diggle, or Diggle asking Oliver to help out with it or something, didn't. I guess he had just resigned himself to the fact that it was too dangerous, but then he wouldn't have wanted them there. So he's really happy with Wild Dog for bringing them there, but if he thought it could be safe, he would have done that himself. So I don't know about that. Really cute kid, his son at the end. That whole thing continues to be really weird and dicey to me. And I won't spend too much time harping on Butterfly Effect again, but I feel like Diggle can't possibly be exactly the same person and make all the same choices that he has to get him to this place if he had such a giant difference in his life with Flashpoint, where he has a daughter instead of a son, a son instead of a daughter. I mean, he named his daughter after Sarah. I just feel like, again, Butterfly Effect, I just feel like things would have altered after that, and we would be at the very least, slightly different place than we are right now. I thought of something watching this episode that hadn't occurred to me before, and that is that this reporter that Oliver is starting to cultivate a relationship with, which, by the way, wasn't everybody watching this episode going, in the words of Admiral Akbar, it's a trap? I mean, we all know where this is going, right? Those two have some chemistry, but she's just out for herself. She's an opportunist. We know that relationship is not going to work out, and that Oliver should be smarter than to get, for lack of a better phrase, in bed with her. And anyway, but she looks a little bit like Laurel. And I especially in facial structure, in the chin, and it makes me wonder if that casting wasn't on purpose, and if we might play with that idea down the road. That part of the reason that he is so smitten with her right now, even after she did everything she could to destroy him, is because she reminds him of Laurel. And then looking at Lance and Thea, that was probably my favorite part of the episode. I really like Thea this season. I like how grown up she's gotten. And I like the idea that she is sticking to her guns and doing everything she can to help Lance, no matter how far he falls, because they've been through so much together. I like the moment when she says, "You're like family to us now." She sees him maybe as a father figure, or a potential father figure. That that's who he should be for her, and he's lost his way so much that she's having to play that role for him right now. The guide and the voice of reason, the conscience. I'm really liking that, but also secondly, because he's got to remind her a little bit of Oliver. He's so stubborn, he's so set in his ways, and he's so self-destructive. And I like that we're not bringing that to the forefront and talking about that too much. That's just kind of inherent in that relationship. The speech she gives him when they're outside the rehab place, I thought was pretty strong. Now, I did think it was kind of amusing when when Lance says that he's worried that Laurel would be ashamed of him, and she says Laurel wouldn't be ashamed. And I'm like, well, it wouldn't be fair for her to, because she's been in exactly the same place before. We have really kind of sainted Laurel too much, and that irritates me a little bit. That's going to be it for me today. This one did not impress me like the last couple, but it's not awful, and there's still a lot of potential with this Prometheus plot. It also could just turn into total Dullsville or absolute nonsense. I guess we'll see where everything is going. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Sure appreciate it. Let me know in the comments what you think of the direction we're going this season so far, what you think is going on with the Prometheus plot. Do we still think it might be Tommy Merlin, or do we think it's maybe somebody from the flashbacks? Leave your comments. Let me know what you think about this episode. And in the meantime, I'm Captain Logan. Thanks again for watching.